Hi guys, this is Prathy, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about sync slices. Not just the sync slices, but advanced properties of the sync slices called grouping. I blogged about this functionality million years ago. Ever since, I didn't get that many opportunities to utilize the functionality, but however, very recently we used it on one of the projects that I was working on, and that reminded me about the existence of this functionality. And I thought, how about I actually do a video about it? So let's see how I use sync slices in this video. Let's start with the use case. I have a very basic report here. I have a title, few slices, and a key metrics. And then underneath, I have a detailed visual which has a line chart showing some values over time. The first requirement from the end user, they want this report to show, by default, to show current month. So I have a slicer called reporting month and it has a value called current month. So I could set that and save it. But however, when I set it to current month, my detail visual is showing only 1 point. So I could fix that by going to edit and visual interactions, tell this slicer to ignore this visual. So now it is showing me all the data. The second requirement from the end user is to not to show all the data, but to show only last 12 months of data. So if I bring year into the picture, you could see it is showing me 2 years worth of data, but the end user want to see only last 12 months. One way I could handle that is I could go to filter pane, bring date into the filters and choose relative date, change it to last 12 months and apply the filter. Now it is showing me the last 12 months data. If I change this into a table, you could read the months. So if it actually uses the latest month from the model instead of using today's date, then I would see January over here. But because it's using the only latest date, it is not showing January. There are things that I could do is I could go and use a different measure. So in this case, if I go and use the month over last 12 months, still it is not showing me the January because I'm not doing any DAX magic here. So this is where sync slices could help. So I have another page here. In this case, my reporting month is already default to current month. Let me change this to a table again. Now you could see January. Instead of showing only Feb to December, it is including the January as well. And that is where sync slicer grouping is useful. So what's happening? So as you could see, I have two slices. This slicer is set to ignore this visual. However, it's still showing the value because of the next slicer. Let me show you what's happening in this. Let me change the slices to vertical list, increase the size. So let me reduce this visual width so you could see the slices. So when I click on this slicer and if I go to sync slices pane, underneath the sync slices, there are advanced options. By default, advanced options is collapsed, but once you expand it, you have this thing called grouping. There are two checkboxes. By default, I just check both of them. So what happens is I have the slicer A and slicer B. Both of them, I kept them under a group called A. So whatever I choose in my slicer 1, for example, if I choose 2024 Jan, it automatically synced that value into second slicer. So if I go and choose 2024 Feb, it is synced to 2024 Feb. And so does if I go and choose the current month, it goes and syncs to the current month. It goes the other way as well. So if I go and choose 2024 July here, it syncs to the other slicer in the group. It can also be like, sometimes you have value in one slicer but doesn't have the value in the other slicer. It can create that value. It's like it syncs that value. That is what I talk about on my blog. But in this case, I have same data in the both slices. So there is a bit of sync slices happening and so does some modeling happening. If I go and open the semantic model, you could see how the relationships behind. So what I have here is a disconnected table called reporting month, and I have my usual date table. My reporting month and the date table has the exactly same structure and the same data. If I go to editing mode and look at the data, so you could see my date table underneath. This is basically have 2 years worth of data, and I have a column called reporting month, and for the latest month it shows current month. It's exactly same for my reporting month table as well. I have current month in the column called reporting month. There is no direct relationship between date table and the reporting month. However, in my measure that I was using, which is month over month for 12 months, I'm doing some DAX logic. What I'm saying is I'm telling it to choose the selected value based on the reporting month date. So this is where when I keep the slices in one group, when I select one value from one slicer, it goes to the other slicer and this value get populated. And in the rest of the DAX, it's you doing the usual finding the max date, finding the minimum date, doing a range here. So we are doing the range start. And then finally, we are checking only display the value when there is a range. Otherwise, don't display the value way. So going back to the report, I'm going to change this back to drop down and then reduce the length and change it to current month. So now what I'm doing here is by default, I choose the current month. It's synced to other slicer. This slicer, I told to ignore this table, but this slicer, I'm telling filter it. So because I'm using the sales month on month DAX measure, but it goes and choose what is the selected value from this slicer, and it does all the calculations based on that selected value, and it gives me last 12 months data. Obviously, for the end users, you don't want them to see two slices on a page because it causes confusion. You don't know which one to show. So you don't have to display it. You could just hide it. Even then, when you're choosing the value, it automatically syncs it even when the slicer is hidden. So for end user experience, what they have is they have one slicer, they go there and they choose that slicer. But behind the screens, that slicer group is not filtering this visual. As you could see, the other slicer, the hidden slicer, is what's filtering this visual and bringing only the last 12 months data. There are so many other use cases where you could utilize this functionality, but this was a use case that we were using on one of a report that I was working on. Showed the trick to my colleagues and they were like, oh, I didn't know this exists. So hope you find it useful. I'll see you in the next video.